All right. I like to get things pumping, relax everybody.
I like it too.
Have some good tunes, going. Gets us in the right headspace.
It's awesome.
Hey, everybody. Today we are going to talk with founder and CEO of FODS LLC, which is an amazing, I always call it a construction technology, in a way that it removes foreign objects and removes mud from tires in order to stop track out. And so I know Kevin Martinez. I've known him for a few years now, and I thought that it would be a great chat to hear his story of how he became the CEO of FODS and how he came up with this great idea and invention. So buckle up, sit back, and enjoy our conversation. Kevin.
Yes, sir.
Hey, man.
How are you?
I'm doing really good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Okay, good.
Just trying to get comfortable, so it's all good.
That's all right. Well, hey, I know you're not a foreign. It's not foreign for you to talk.
No.
I feel like every time we run into each other, you have an amazing story to tell. And really, this show, How'd You Get Here? I started a few years ago, and I found that every time I'd have a conversation with somebody, they'd have some sort of interesting story about how they got to where they are. And then it was one of those things where I was always reminded that a lot of times people get discouraged, they get setbacks, and then they feel like, oh, that person is successful because of some silver spoon, or that person's successful because they had something given to them, or
right.
Whatnot. And the thing I found was that the more stories I heard, it was just average people who worked hard or, had a few opportunities given to them that they took advantage of, and they got success from that. And so what I always want to try to encourage people is to say, listen, you're not so far from where you want to be, and you have what it takes within you to be successful.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
And I think hearing stories from people allows us to connect with that, and it inspires us to kind of grow and move forward, and give us the little kick in the pants that we need to be successful. So I want to start from the very beginning with you, because I've heard a lot about your stories of you being a pilot and things like that. I haven't heard much about where you grew up, what kind of home life you grew up in, and kind of environment. So let's go ahead and just start back at the very beginning, where you were born, where you grew up, what kind of childhood you kind of had.
Well, I grew up here in Denver, and I lived in a very modest home. It was a duplex on 12th and Adams. My parents were divorced. My mom left my dad when I was 5 years old. She put herself through nursing school. So my brother and I grew up watching my mom struggle through her travels through life. And it was very inspirational, because it was like, you know what? I look back at my childhood. She gave us everything that she possibly could, but she really didn't have a lot, because she, like I said, she was put herself through nursing school. She got a master's degree, and we saw all the hard work that she put in. And growing up, I went to Denver East High School and graduated from East in 1980. Went to Metropolitan State College.
So I got a question for you.
Yep.
So, growing up in a lower middle class family.
Lower middle class.
Yeah. When you were completing high school, was college something that was valued by your mom, or something that you were saying, okay, I want to go to college? Did you have a history of family members going to college? And
we didn't have a lot of family members that I was actually the first one in our family that went, other than my mother. But she always told us, and to this day, I preach to my children all the time, how valuable and the necessity of life is education. And my mom, she's like, you know what? I can't pay for your college, but we'll figure out a way to get you through school. But through my life, God has pointed me in the right direction, and things always seem to work out. But when I was in college, I got a job as a tile setter for a big construction company doing exterior granite on a skyscraper downtown. And lo and behold, that one job took me through 2.5 years of my college, and it actually paid for my school.
Now, when you were going to school, did you have a mindset of like, okay, this is what I want to do when I grow up? Like when you were a little kid, did you say, oh, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer? I mean, what?
Well, it's kind of funny because growing up, I had an uncle, my mom's brother-in-law. He was an airline mechanic. And growing up, he would take my brother and I to the airport to watch the jets come in and land. So he kind of put the spark in me at that time. And when I got to college, I really didn't know what to do. But I was walking down the hall one day, and I went to the aerospace program and started in. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'll pursue being a pilot. And I did. And I graduated in 1985. Had a ride with United Airlines through their intern program. And I said, you know what, this is something I want to do. And I got lucky right out of college. I got a corporate flying job. And everything in life has a price. At that point in my life, everything was great. It was an adventure. But my wife and I, we met in college, and like I said, everything in life has a price. At that point, I was traveling all the time, never had time to see her or be with her. And then later on, we had a family, and I was always gone. And I grew up in construction, so I came back to it. And it was kind of funny because everybody thought I was crazy because I was leaving the aviation industry and going back to construction. And they're like, why would you do that? I said, because my wife and my family mean more to me than anything in the world. That's the core. And even growing up, my grandfather would always tell us, the family is the most important thing in your life. And I really never knew that or believed it until I got older. And that's when I went back to construction. So I would be home with my family day in and day out every night. And people ask me, actually to this day, a lot of them are like, why would you do that? And it's like, you know what? Because my little kids, they didn't know who Dad was. I mean, I was the guy that came home, changed uniforms, and off I go again. And then one day it was like, you know what? This isn't for me. I have 2 children and a wife that I never see. And I have one shot to make it right. And going back into construction, we were building homes, and then I got hired with a big construction outfit. And one day I came up with the idea of FODS. And if I hadn't changed my life around, FODS would have never been born. And it was very ironic because I was working on a project with CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation, and it was roughly 2010, the summer of 2010, and track out has always been a problem in construction. Basically, what I mean by track out is that you cannot track dirt, mud, and debris onto city roads. It's against the law. And CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation, and you also have other agencies that step into it, stormwater inspectors, and they will fine you. And typically the first fine is roughly $5,000. And you get a prize for a second fine because they say, you know what, this is a willful act.
Right.
We gave you a fine before, and obviously you didn't think that was an eye-opener, but the second fine is usually 5 times that amount. And typically in the United States for years and years and years, they used aggregate or rock at the exit point of construction sites to clean the tires before you get on the road. And the rock never worked because depending on the volume of traffic going in and out of the job site, the rock would get crushed into the ground, and depending on moisture, rain or snow, it would happen more quickly. Or if you had volumes of trucks, then you would have to have, we call it fluffing. You would call up for another load of rock to be brought in, and it just culminates in layer after layer. At the end of the job, you're still required to get rid of it. And at that point, it becomes contaminated because the trucks drive in. They have diesel fuel dropping on the rock. They have
brake fluid, oil.
Oh, yeah. All that stuff is dropping on the rock. So at the end of the job, you have to get rid of this contaminated rock. And like I said, it just never worked. And I was working in 2010 with CDOT on a project, their training facility. And I was in charge of the BMPs, the track out and things like that. And I was sitting there one day, and I was looking at this track out that they were going to use to train their employees around the country. And I was like, you know what? This is not working. And I sat there, and it was really strange, and I kept looking at the problem. And I said, well, how do I fix this problem? And, I mentioned God himself. It was like I was just sitting there, and boom, the idea popped in my head to come up with a mat that worked better than anything in the world, that was a reusable product. And when I did that, I started sketching. I had a notebook, and I started sketching my idea. And it just happened to be on this particular job, the senior engineer from CDOT. His name was Tom Boyce, very wonderful man. I'm like, Tom, come over here and look at my drawings and look what I've come up with. And he was sitting there, and I remember the sun was shining, and he was looking at my drawings and staring at me, and then he would look at the drawings and stare at me again, and I'm like, Tom, stop staring at me. You're freaking me out.
Say something.
Yeah. And he sat there, and he looked at me, and he's like, Kevin, you just came up with the perfect mousetrap. This is incredible, because we've needed something like this for 25 years in highways and bridges and whatnot, and you came up with the perfect idea.
Now, had you ever invented anything before? Have you ever had ideas?
Oh, yeah. No, I have. It's kind of crazy because I've had a couple other inventions that I came up with. And lo and behold, I came up with one in college. I had a class, and the professor, this guy was incredibly smart because he had roughly 35, 40 students in his class. And part of the class curriculum was, hey, I want all of you guys to think about an idea, come up with an invention, and if it's something really good, maybe I can help you with it. So he had 40 minds every semester. And I came up with this idea I don't know if you have boots. It doesn't matter if you have boots or shoes or whatnot, women's dress shoes. As you drive in a vehicle, your right heel that presses on the gas is always chafing,
rubbing back and forth.
And you get out, and you might have I used to have cowboy boots, so this is how I came up with this. I looked at my heel, and I'm like, wow, my heel's always scuffed up. How do I fix this? So I came up with a little plastic guard that covered the heel, and it had two prongs that went right inside the heel to keep it in place. And when you got it, you parked or whatever, you just pop it off, and it protects the heel. And lo and behold, about a year and a half later, I see this heel guard in a store.
Are you serious?
I swear to God. And I'm like, what the heck? This is my idea. So then I did some research, and the professor's name was on the patent, and I'm like, no good, man. Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you're not blinking this thing off here, but yeah, actually, so when
you've kind of had a creative mind.
I've always thought of things and how to fix them. So I have had a few great ideas, but I never had the opportunity to follow it through fruition. And when we talk about FODS, for example, when I came up with the idea, and it's one thing to have a concept in your mind. It's the secondary thing is to have your sketches of your idea. But from that point on, it's very, very difficult to make things all fall into place. And as we were talking earlier, I have been blessed with some really, really good people in my life. And I had a mentor when I started this exercise. And throughout trying to get FODS to where it is now, there were a lot of times that I would get down and out because it's like, oh my God, how am I going to come up with the money? What's the next step? The engineering of the product. I mean, you have the ideas, you come up with a design, and it was really funny because my current partner and I, we made the prototypes in my garage. My wife thought we were crazy because we had sheet goods of plastic, and we cut them into pyramids and whatnot, and we had plastic shavings all over the garage, and she's like, what are you guys doing? But once she saw the prototype, we glued the pieces together and we spray painted them with yellow paint, and we actually brought them fairly close to your facility here, about I'd say at less than a half a mile away.
Yeah, the DTC.
Yep.
I was there for that.
Yeah, so we put them out there, and lo and behold, the city inspectors started coming out, and they're like, what the heck is that? And we only had a 4x8 track out that we made out of sheet goods, and they started looking at it and watching how the vehicles would drive across it. But even that process of how to get this prototype actually made into a production facility was incredibly difficult, because you need a lot of capital, and we didn't have a lot of capital. And it's like, well, where do you find the capital? So we started reaching out, trying to figure out our next couple steps, and we had our attorney step in. We hired a law firm, and my uncle, he was a judge. He is a retired judge now. So like I said, I went to him and I'm like, hey, Uncle, how do I find a law firm that can help me out during the process? And he said, well, give me a week or two and I'll come up with somebody. And lo and behold, he did. And they were like, well, Kevin, you need a very high capital investment here. You need to protect your idea because you're just a little fish in a little pond. And if somebody else sees your idea, they can easily take it because they have the capital to take your idea away. So we were very cautious in who we talked to. We didn't talk to very many people about FODS, and we started trying to raise capital. And I had a couple friends of mine that were in the banking industry, and they would set up interviews for me to talk to these people that could bring the capital that we needed. But they were not nice people. They were unkind, to tell you the truth, because everybody that we talked to that wanted to help me, so to say, they wanted to take my company away from me. And just like Shark Tank. Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but,
Yeah.
But the sharks, they're out there, and believe me.
You give us 80%, we'll give you 20.
Yeah. And yeah, on one of them, I can't remember, they told me that about that, 75%, and we'll give you a 6-figure salary. And I said, well, what about my voting stock? You don't have any. So you're going to vote me right off the island. This isn't working too well.
Exactly.
So, I was very discouraged, and a lot of times during this whole process, discouragement almost took over. And I was like, you know what? This is too hard. I can't do this. But a good friend of mine that worked on that same project for CDOT, his dad was very influential in pushing me along. He was my mentor. His name was Bob Martinez.
So I want to talk about that real quick. Just the importance of a mentor, because to me it sounds like having a mentor in this situation really helped you push forward and not give up. But can you look it back too in your life, like other mentors that you had that maybe gave you advice or that helped you along? I mean, since you were younger.
Probably my greatest mentor. Like I said, our family was very instrumental in pushing us in the right direction. But my grandfather, my mom's mom, he was probably my greatest mentor, because he would always tell my brother and I that average is easy to come by. But if you want to do better in life, you have to push yourself to get educated. And he was an educated man. He believed in college and all that stuff, and he would always talk to us about getting educated, because he knew that the only steps in life would come through education. And he would always push us and talk to us. And so he was probably the number one.
Your first mentor?
My first mentor.
Yeah.
But and he had five businesses that at one time.
Wow.
That he had going. So I mean, if you think about, and he was raising 4 kids, and 5 kids, and so he didn't have a lot of time. And I think talking to my mom and his children, they're like, well, your grandpa wasn't the kindest man at some points. And I was thinking back during my growth through FODS, it's like, you know what? If I had 5 kids and 5 businesses, you don't have a lot of time. So either you walk the line and you pulled your weight, or you're going to get clubbed or something.
Right.
So, but getting back to FODS, in the question that you had about mentorship, I believe that everybody in this world needs a mentor. And when you look at people that are very successful, they didn't get there overnight, and I guarantee you they didn't get there by themselves. They all had somebody to push them along. You need a very strong family, and I thank my wife probably more than anybody else in the travels, because she was always there for me. She was very positive, and she had a positive role during the whole process, because I'd come home and I was just down and out, and I'm like, you know what, I can't do this. I just don't know how to do this. But and she would always encourage me to keep trying, and why don't you go meet Mr. Martinez and have breakfast with him. So we actually would meet once a month for breakfast, and I would ask him all these questions, and he was a wonderful man. He had a company, and I'm sure you've seen what he's done. He put the power lines from Denver right over the Rocky Mountains to California.
Oh, wow.
So if you go west on I-70 and look up at the top of the mountains, you can see what he did. Yeah. And at that time, he had no idea how he was going to do that, because he had a company that would do curb and gutters repairs around the city. But he was a politician. He was always involved in politics throughout the city. And one day I was talking to him. I'm like, well, what gave you the idea to go across the mountains if you didn't know anything about electricity? He said, well, I myself had people pushing me along. And he said there was a big job. It was a multi-million-dollar project, and they were looking for a Hispanic company to do the job, or to have an influence on this project. So he's like, well, I didn't know anything about electricity, but I did my research, and I started hiring people that did. And we put in a bid to carry the electricity on the power lines all the way to California, and it worked. We had helicopters and all this stuff,
wow.
And we got the project. And he's like, you know what? I didn't know how to do it, but I figured it out. Just like yourself, you figured it out.
Yeah.
And like I said, when I would get down and out, there was a point, I would say probably I got my patent in 2011, November 22nd. And about a year after that, we started up, and it was in around Christmas time, and I was like, you know what, Bob, I can't do this. I mean, I can't get the funding. I just don't know my next couple steps. And he's like, you know what, Kevin, at this point in your travels, as far as getting this thing going, you're at a point that 97%, I always remember that number, you're at a point that 97% of people fail because they're right at the crest of the mountain, but they can't get over.
Right.
And he said, so what you need to do is take a little break, but get your act together and finish this thing up. Finish what you started, because you're so close. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So, like I said,
and that's something I always tell people too, to kind of like live without regrets, in the sense of, so many times we think about things, and then we never pursue those things, and then we go beyond a point to where we could ever do those things again, and then you always have these regrets or thoughts of like, well, what if I would have, or what if I would have done that? And I always tell people, I say, listen, you should always try to live your life in a way that you can look back and say, I tried and failed and it didn't work out, or I tried it and succeeded, because then you can kind of live in the present and never have to have any regrets about you not doing something that you thought you maybe could do, Oh
yeah, no, I agree, because listening to Bob, I did get my act together, and it's like, you know what? I'll figure it out, and I did. But like I said, I had a nucleus of friends and family around me, and I went to my friends and my family to help get the company funded. All my friends, all my family, everybody that I knew that were close to me, I went to them and I said, you know what? I have this idea. I need to do my next step. I need to buy equipment. I need to buy a mold. And it's going to cost me $250,000. I need your help. Can you help me? And everybody that I went to reach out to, other than the sharks, naturally, my friends and my family, they're like, you know what? We know you, and we believe in you. We don't know what FODS is. I mean, it was a concept to them, and I said, this is going to work. I just need some help. And they all believed in me, and everybody that I talked to believed in me. And lo and behold, the check started coming in for $25,000 a share. And one day I raised, it was about $800,000. And it was enough just to get started. And we started with the manufacturing the equipment. And it was really amazing, because I couldn't believe how many smart people there are in this world. But when they saw the drawings and whatnot, they went off the drawings, and I hired an engineer to help me. And they had these huge blocks of aluminum, and they had what they call a CNC machine that would router the aluminum into all these shapes of the pyramids that would end up being FODS mats. And I would always ask him, I said, so you tell me that all these big chunks of aluminum that you're cutting up, you're going to plug in the machine and it's going to make mats. Show me. And they're like, oh, Mr. Martinez, you're going to be surprised.
Yeah.
So they finished the milling and whatnot and put these big chunks on semi-trucks, and they were actually the mold. And my partner, Bryce, he found a company in Florida where we were going to have the mats made. And they put everything together. It took them about 10 days. And lo and behold, I was sitting there, and I was dressed up to check this out. And I was sitting there, and I had a couple engineers around me, and they all looked at me, and they're like, Mr. Martinez, you're not going to start crying, are you? And I said, you know what? I don't think so, but if I do, I've earned that right.
That's right.
Yeah. So here comes the first couple mats, and I was like, oh, my God. And it was just one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life, because now you actually have something that you thought of that was a concept in your mind, and now you see an end product that is your creation, and it was just like, this is so amazing to me. But once we started getting the mats, it's like, okay, now how do we sell these things? Where do we sell them? And like I said, we were real lucky because there was a company here in Denver that actually looked at the mats, and we had the mats brought a truck to Denver. So I met one of the big companies, Bowman Construction Supply, and I was trying to get them to buy the mats. And one of the senior guys, Ken, he worked with Bowman. He's like, yeah, you know what? We'll take a truckload. And man, I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, this is like, I just won the lotto,
Right, yeah.
And his boss came back and said, I don't think so. And I was like, oh my God, no. He said, well, we don't know if they're going to work or whatnot, so let's bring the first truck in on consignment. And my heart dropped, but it was like, well, I guess you're right. I knew he was right, but at the time I thought I was luckier than that, but it did work out. We brought the mats to Denver, and about a month and a half later, we positioned the mats in 4 quadrants: north, south, west, and east. And we had them on construction sites, and lo and behold, people started calling us because they didn't know what these big yellow mats were. And the mats are made in like a pyramid shapes. They're 12 feet by 7 feet, 7 feet being the direction of travel. And how the mats work is that as you drive a vehicle over the mats, the shapes of the pyramids, they actually make the tires deformed, and it opens the lugs of the tires, so all the debris falls on the mat itself. And lo and behold, as the trucks come off, the mud and debris falls off on the mats, and your tires are clean. So pretty soon the phone calls started coming in, and we hired a gentleman by the name of Nate Barker, and he was in charge of business development and sales. And right now we have roughly over 200 sales men in the field across the United States. Last year we became a global company. We're in New Zealand, Australia, United Kingdom, and we just sent some mats to Japan, of all places. So
that's so awesome.
It was a crazy ride, but what I tell people is like, you know what? If you have an idea, kind of like what you were saying, don't sit on it, because there are people out there that will help you, and they will mentor you. And I tell everybody that I know is like, if you have an idea, call me up. Here's my business card. I will help you, because I know what it's like. To take something on this big, it's not an easy road.
Yeah.
And there are too many people out there that want to take it away from you. But I will help you, I guarantee you.
Yeah. I always think of ideas as like these gifts, right? That just come from the universe. They come to your head.
Oh yeah.
And if you don't act on them, then it'll pass you on and go to somebody else, and then somebody may act on that idea.
Right.
It's
true.
And it's just
it is true.
Capturing those, because in a previous life I was a songwriter.
Yeah.
And I would get, like, in the middle of the night, I would wake up and just hear this song in my head, and it was like, okay, this is like a gift that came to me, and I would write this song, and I remember there being times where I had maybe just written some lyrics down, but I didn't pursue writing it completely. And then, a year or two later, you'd hear somebody with that same kind of concept or idea. You're like, hey, I had an idea to write that song. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And so I think it's one of those things where, if you have an idea, you should at least try to capture it and then walk it out a little bit. And I think that's where mentors come in handy too.
I
right?
agree. Yeah. Because like I say, I've talked to a lot of people, and they're like, oh, Kevin, I had this idea. I wrote it down, and they bring me, their drawings and whatnot, and I say, well, let's look and see if we can find something here on a patent pending or patent search. And we had one guy, a good friend of mine, he had a great idea, and he was a truck driver, and he would drive to the East Coast, and there's tons of bugs out there, so they'd all hit his windshield, and he had a wiper system that you press a button, the wipers would actually come off of the windshield, and it was like a cleaning pad, like at the gas station, you dip that in there, and you could scrub the window. He came up with that it would do it by itself on the truck. Oh, wow. And it was crazy. But we looked, we did a patent search, and he's like, holy cow, somebody beat me to it. But it's like, you know what? They didn't beat you to it. He had the idea 2.5 years earlier. But like you said, it passes you up because, and I always would tell my wife, it's like, you know what? This is a godsend, because why in the world am I the one that came up with this idea? There's so many brilliant people out there. Why didn't somebody else do it? Maybe they had the idea, but they never followed it through. And that's why I would say I was truly blessed, because I had the opportunities. And when people talk about inventors and whatnot, you look at it and it's like, well, how do you get there? What's the biggest thing in this process? And I looked back at it, and an entrepreneur in the dictionary is a risk taker. But it's like, you know what? I've had a lot of people, like, Mr. Martinez, you're a great entrepreneur. It's like, you know what? That's not really the definition of who I am. It's perseverance. That's who I am. And it wasn't that I persevered by myself. My mentors pushed me. And every time I wanted to turn around, my wife is like, you know what? You got to keep going. You're almost there. You can do this. And Mr. Martinez, my mentor, and I think of my grandfather as well, he would always call me Sonny Boy. And when I finally got this thing up and running, I sat down and I could hear his voice, Sonny Boy, you finally got there. So, when we talk about how we got here, it was a help from a lot of people. Yeah. And I really believe, and every day I thank my blessings to dear God himself, because I couldn't have done it without him. And, I thank him. I thank everybody in the circle. I thank you as far as our marketing and whatnot, because everybody's put in and helped us along the road. So
yeah, what are some things that you could share as far as like some pitfalls that stood out to you, like as you were starting a company and getting partners and working with different people? What are some things that you could advise some people who are coming up to say, hey, I learned from this mistake, you should watch out for X, Y, and Z as you're growing a company and building a company?
Well, I would say that there's a multitude of things, and what you have to look through is all the negative people. There's a ton of negative people, because, and I hate to say it, some of them came from my own family. I had some family members that would say, well, I don't know why you're putting all this time and effort in it. It's not going to work. Nobody's going to buy it. And then I would think about it, and I'm like, you know what? You're wrong, and I'm going to prove you wrong. But when it comes from your own family, it kind of,
that's hard.
Yeah. It hits home. And I had some family members are like, you know what? Stay away from the dream breakers, because the dream breakers are people that they want to bring you down. Because if you're building this company, and they don't have what you have, and they get jealous and whatnot, you got to look past that, and you got to make sure that you don't get consumed by people like that. So I would say, have positive people around you, because sometimes when you get down and you don't know what direction, and these other people are telling you that's not going to work, me personally, I wanted to walk away a couple times because it's like, and I tell you about my wife and my family, they're wonderful. I would say, okay, well, we got money to go to Disneyland or whatever, and we're going to go on vacation. And guess what? Now I just had to pay my attorneys and engineers. Here's a picture of Disneyland. Why don't we go camping instead? But the kids were great. My wife was fantastic, and you know what? We would go camping, and everything was fun. I mean, we got through all that, and I would say also the hardest part about building a company is the capital. And I'll be the first to tell you it was the hardest part of my journey. So have a plan and just work your plan. And lo and behold, people will come to help you. I guarantee you.
Feel the dreams. If you build it, they will come.
And they will. Because I mean, I couldn't tell you, Mark, how many times I'd sit here and, I mean, I had sleepless nights. I mean, my wife would tell you, I'd get up and she's like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm thinking about this and this and this. And I got so bad that it was a point that I would actually deprogram my mind. I'd go into my office at home and sit down with a notebook, and I would write out everything that I can think of that I had to do the next day. That way, during the night, I wouldn't think about it.
Right.
And, I would start sleeping, and I have this bracelet here, and it has negatively charged ions in it to help my mind process slow down, because I would constantly think of things, and every night I would wake up inevitably. It was almost like a clock between 1:45 in the morning to 10 after 2. All the ideas, all the answers to the ideas would come at that time. So I was like, okay, well, I might as well just get up, And my wife's like, there he is downstairs again in the office. But after a while, I learned that by deprogramming my mind, I would get through the night. But even so, now I would say I probably sleep 5 or 6 hours a night. And
before you wake up and the ideas start popping.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, I don't need any more ideas. But no, like I said, the struggles of something like this are huge. But if you look around and you have people that believe in you, family, friends, you'll get through this journey. I guarantee you. And I tell everybody, and that's why I was saying earlier, I hand out business cards, and I'm like, if you have an idea, you call me up, and I will help you through this. I'll be your mentor. And I have had a few people that I've tried to mentor, and it works, because people have a hard time asking for help. I mean, you talk to your wife and whatnot, and it's a team. And a friend of mine had a plaque in his office, and he said, the road to success, and a man that is very successful has a woman. You marry the right woman and you'll be okay. So I believe in that.
Yeah.
And I got lucky. I've been with my wife now for 37 years.
Living proof.
Living proof.
Of that good relationship.
Yeah, but she's put up with a lot. So.
I'm sure.
But, like I said, if you can get through all that, you'll be fine. And you'll figure it out. It just takes a lot of work. And you just can't give up on your dreams, because then you'll kick yourself around for the rest of your days.
Yeah.
And I had a gentleman one time, because traveling around the United States when we were going to trade shows and whatnot, I had a young guy. He's like, Mr. Martinez, what's the key to success? I looked at him and I'm like, the key to success is getting out of bed every day when somebody else is sleeping in. even
Yeah.
on Saturdays and Sundays.
Mm.
And he said, well, it must be pretty easy then, huh? And I was like, well, let me tell you something. The harder I work, the easier it gets. So,
Yeah, I always say, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
I get pretty lucky,
Get
too.
pretty lucky.
Yeah.
Well, I want to do a few lightning round questions just to kind
Yep.
of get to know you a little bit.
Okay.
Real simple stuff. What was your first car?
The first car I had was a 1973 Ford Torino.
I don't even know what a Ford Torino is.
There was a movie that came out called Ford Torino.
Okay. Was it the Grand Torino?
Grand
Oh,
Torino,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, I know what
Yeah,
that car
okay.
is. That's it.
Yep, so that was the first car I
Okay.
had. And yeah, I actually had it for probably 15, 20 years.
Okay. Favorite kind of music, band?
Jazz.
Jazz? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, you were a trumpet player? We
Yep.
really didn't get into any of that. But
Yep.
I remember you saying
Yeah,
that you
when
played
I
the
was
trumpet.
I played the trumpet for quite a few years. And it was kind of funny because at one time, this gal, it was the end of my trumpet playing days because she's like, wow, what? You got a weird lip. That was the muscle from playing the trumpet, right? She
You're
made, she made me feel so bad that I was
I'm
like,
not going to get girls. I better stop playing the trumpet.
Yep. So yeah, it was kind of funny, but that was the end of the trumpet playing. But
All right. What about any book or anything like that you've read, or motivational speaker or anything like that?
yeah, actually, there was a book years and years ago I read when I was a pilot, The Great American Success Story, because I would travel and I would always listen to people. And that was probably one thing that I learned from Mr. Martinez, my mentor. He always would tell me, you know what, listen to people and don't be the one that's always carrying on the conversation. And he had all these little intricacies in his language, his vocabulary, and he would tell me things like that to listen to people. Because the greatest thing that he learned in his career was that by listening to people, and he would also tell me never go to lunch by yourself, because if you're trying to work out a problem, if you listen to 2 or 3 people maybe you're having lunch with, you ask them a question, and he said typically the one that has the answer is the one that you don't think really knows what they're talking about,
Right.
but they have the answers. And a lot of times I didn't know what to do, and I would listen, and the answer would come to me. So I'm a good listener.
Nice. All right. Favorite food?
Favorite food? Well, you see me, I'm kind of a chubby fella. I love food. Golly, I love seafood. But I am a meat and potatoes kind of guy too.
Yeah,
So
steak.
I love a steak. Italian food. I like it
You
all.
like it all.
Yeah.
If
You don't
it's-
get this big
If it's
overnight.
good, you'll eat it.
Yep. But I'll look at some foods and my wife's like, you're going to eat it or you're not going to eat it anymore. But no, she's a great cook. So I'm lucky, man.
Oh, man. Well, hey, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the show and
Thank you for having
sharing
me.
your journey and
Yep.
talking to us. I know we could have a conversation for many more hours.
Oh yeah, no,
you know.
I love it.
Yeah. So, I just appreciate that. And I encourage you guys to go out to getfods.com, check out that product. It's pretty amazing. And I hope that you were inspired today by Kevin's story of, taking an idea, following it to fruition, and making sure that you surround yourself with positive people and good mentors. So
Very good. Thank
until
you for
next,
having me.
Yes, until next time, remember, you're not so far from where you want to be, and you have what it takes within you to be successful.